lot of events played out in the courtroom today, which will definitely blow your mind. Today's court session happened to be one of the most exciting court sessions we've ever seen in a long time. So the question here is, what really happened? Well, in this video we shall be explaining and critically analyzing every single thing that happened in the court section today. So the court proceedings kicked off at about 10:20 a.m. The legal counsel team of the both parties were fully present. The court session started by the prosecuting lawyer making an introductory speech. So let's take a listen to what the prosecuting lawyer had to say in the courtroom today. He stated, and I quote, "Your Honor, today we are here to show that Simon illegally bought weapons. We have a witness codenamed T5 who is all the way from Nigeria. T5 will testify that Simon sent money to him to buy guns. We have bank statements and other evidence to prove this. This is a serious offense because it's illegal to buy weapons like this, and it's dangerous. Think of it like this. Simon ordered guns online, but instead of a package arriving at his door, the guns were bought by our witness in Nigeria using money Simon sent. We have the receipt to speak, showing that transaction. It's a clear case of illegal weapons purchases. We are confident that the evidence we'll present, including T5's testimony and financial records, will clearly demonstrate Simon's guilt. This isn't just about breaking the law, it's about public safety. We are ready to proceed when you are." So as you can see, this is statements coming from the prosecuting lawyer claiming that Simon purchased or ordered for weapons to be sent to the southeastern region of Nigeria. But instead of these weapons getting to the specific address, an individual, a close friend of Simon, intercepted these weapons. He bought them and he followed suit to do the unimaginable. So let's go back to the courtroom and see the cross-examination between the prosecuting lawyer and this individual, this witness known as T5, who claims to intercept the weapon sent by Mr. Simon. So let's see the conversation between these two parties. So the prosecuting lawyer called upon T5 to take the stance. T5 came into the stance and did all necessary rights needed to do as a witness. So the prosecuting lawyer started his questions by saying, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. Can you please state your name for the record?" T5 replied by stating his name. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have testified that you received money from the defendant, known as Simon. Can you tell us how that money was sent to you?" T5 replied by saying, "Yes, the money came through several wire transfers. I received money in my bank account." The prosecuting lawyer continued to say, "And did Simon tell you what the money was for?" T5 replied, "Yes, he did. He told me the money was to purchase certain items." The prosecuting lawyer asked, "And what items were you instructed to purchase?" T5 replied, "He told me to buy arms, weapons." The prosecuting lawyer claimed, "Can you describe the specific weapons you were instructed to purchase?" T5 gives clear confirmation of the weapons he was asked to purchase by Mr. Simon. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "Now, let's talk about how you were able to intercept these weapons. Can you explain what happened after you received the money and purchased the weapons?" T5 replied by saying, "After I received the money, I purchased the weapons." The prosecuting lawyer said, "And then what happened? What happened next?" T5 said, "And then I contacted the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "And why did you contact the authorities?" T5 said, "Because I realized what was happening was wrong. I knew it was illegal and I couldn't let this happen." The prosecuting lawyer said, "So you never delivered these weapons to Simon's men?" T5 replied, "No, I contacted the authorities immediately after the purchase." The lawyer continued by saying, "So you are the reason the weapons never reached Simon's men, is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that is absolutely correct." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, can you confirm that you have provided all necessary details to the authorities regarding Simon's transactions and the weapons purchased?" T5 said, "Yes, I have provided all the details to the authorities." The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, "T5, you have stated that you received the money through wire transfers. Can you tell the court what information was on those transfers?" T5 said, "Yes, the transfers included Simon's name and the amount of money and the date of transfer." The lawyer continued by saying, And did you have any contact with Simon after the purchase of these weapons? T5 said, yes, I had a brief communication with him. The prosecuting lawyer continued, and what was the nature of that communication? T5 said, I informed him that the purchase was complete and the items were ready for delivery. The prosecuting lawyer continued and said, and what was his response? T5 said, he seemed pleased. The lawyer continued by saying, thank you, T5. That's all for now. As you can see, this is a cross-examination between T5 and the prosecuting lawyer. But if you paid attention to this cross-examination, you notice that it doesn't make sense. You notice that there are a lot of mistakes and errors, which definitely is not adding up. And let's see if the judge will somehow, some way pinpoint these errors, because from the very first glance, we notice that the statements coming from T5 and his lawyer isn't adding up. It doesn't make sense. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what followed suit. Back in the court session, T5 continued when the prosecuting lawyer said, okay, I'm done with your cross-examination. T5 continued by saying, I want to present documents. I want to present a series of documents to the courtroom to better portray my point that Simon really sent money to me. So T5 continued by saying, Your Honor, members of the jury, I stand before you today not merely as a witness, but as a crucial link in unraveling a dangerous plot. I am here to present the financial records that undeniably prove that the defendant Simon paid me to purchase illegal weapons. These documents are not mere copies, they are the original records of the transactions, meticulously preserved to ensure the integrity of this case. T4 went on to bring out some documents, and he continued by saying, before you are bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, and digital payment receipts. Each document meticulously details the flow of funds from Simon's account to my own. These records clearly show a series of transactions, precisely timed and directly linked to the purchase of these weapons. The amounts match exactly the invoices I received from the arms dealer. The dates correspond perfectly to the timeline of the purchase, demonstrating a clear and direct connection between the money Simon sent and the weapons acquired. T5 also went a step further to also present all of his documents before the courtroom. He presented a series of bank statements, transactional records, and receipts. He claimed that Simon sent these monies to him. At this point, Simon wasn't looking very happy. He wasn't looking so convinced. From his facial expression, one can simply tell that Simon doesn't know T5 in any way, shape, or form, and that's what we think. So Simon asked the judge, permit me to speak, and Simon was granted the right. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what Simon had to say. I, Simon, respectfully request the opportunity to cross-examine the witness known as T5. It is my right to challenge the testimony presented against me, and I believe that the thorough examination of T5's statement is essential for ensuring a fair trial. I would like to address the following points during this cross-examination. And Simon went on to list 5 key points. 5 points he needs clarity from T5. He said the very first one here, the very first point I need more clarity on is the clarity of transactions. I intend to question T5 about the specifics of the financial transactions, including the exact amounts and dates of the wire transfers mentioned. The second point I will need clarity on is the intent and purpose. I wish to clarify the context in which the money was sent. It is crucial to understand whether T5 had any other intentions or agreements regarding the funds. And the third part is I will need clarity on the credibility of evidence. I will seek to challenge the authenticity of the documents presented by T5, including the bank statements and any other accompanying messages. And the fourth point here is I will need clarity on the communications with authorities. I want to explore T5's interactions with law enforcement and whether any pressure or influence was exerted on them to provide testimony against me. And the fifth point here is I will need clarity on the motivation for testimony. I aim to investigate T5's motivations for coming forward and whether there are any personal interests that may have influenced their testimony. I believe that addressing these points will provide clarity and context to the court regarding the allegations against me. Thank you, my Lord, for considering my request. And this, like I said, is a clear statement coming from Simon asking the judge to grant him permission to cross-examine T5, while using 5 key points as a basis of his questioning. Yes. The following conversations between T5 and Mr. Simon will be very, very interesting. So let's go back to the courtroom and see what follows suit afterwards. At this point, the presiding judge gave Simon the full permission to cross-examine the witness known as T5. So Simon asked, "Good morning, T5. Thank you for being here today. You've testified that I sent you money for the purchase of weapons. Is that correct?" T5 said, "Yes, that's correct." Simon continued by saying, "Let's talk about those transactions. You've presented bank statements. Can you confirm that the account numbers listed on those statements belong to you?" "Yes," replied T5. "They are my accounts." Simon continued and said, "And the name listed on this account, is that your full legal name?" "Yes, it is," replied T5. Simon continued by saying, "Now, regarding the purpose of these transactions, you claim it was for weapons. Did you and I ever discuss other business ventures?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, we did." Simon continued, "And were those other ventures discussed through the same channels as the financial transactions?" "Yes," replied T5. Simon said, "So, the method of communication and financial transfers were not exclusively for the purpose of purchasing weapons, is that right?" T5 continued by saying, "Yes, but the context is important." Simon continued by saying, "But the method of communication and the transfers were not exclusively for weapons, correct?" T5 said, "Yes, but..." Simon interrupted him and said, "You received money and you claimed that the money was for weapons. However, you also received money for other purposes, correct?" "Yes," replied T5, "but the messages clearly indicated the purpose." Simon continued by saying, "Let's examine those messages. You have mentioned that these messages were sent with the wire transfers. Are you certain the messages explicitly stated the purpose of weapons?" T5 looked through his document to probably get a response, but Simon continued by saying, "This document you're showing states business investment, doesn't it? Does it mention weapons?" T5 replied by saying, "No, it doesn't showcase any form or any purpose that it was for the purchase of weapons." Simon continued by saying, "T5, you contacted the authorities after receiving this money, correct?" "Yes," replied T5. "Did you discuss this matter with anyone else before contacting with the authorities?" Simon asked. "Yes, I did," said T5. Simon continued by saying, "Did anyone advise you on what to say or how to present the information to the authorities?" T5 said no. Simon continued by saying, "And during those discussions, did you consider the potential consequences of your actions, including the possibility of illegal repercussions?" T5 said, "No, I did not think about it."
The global AI market is projected.
T5 said, "No, I did not think about it." Simon said, "T5, you've stated that you purchased these weapons. Can you provide proof of this purchase?" "I have the invoices," replied T5. Simon said, "And were these invoices in your name?" "Yes, they were," replied T5. Simon asked, "And you have provided these invoices to the authorities?" "Yes." Simon continued by saying, "T5, you claimed you never delivered these weapons to my boys. Is that correct?" "Yes, that is correct. But you intend to deliver the weapons to my boys. Is that correct?" "Yes," replied T5. Simon said, "Thank you, T5. No further questions at this time." And Simon leaves the stand. If you paid attention to Simon's cross-examination, you will notice that he did not deny meeting with T5, but he's trying to make a point clear that the money that he sent is for a business deal. So let's go back to the courtroom and see the following conversations that played out after Simon cross-examined T5. So back to the courtroom. Before Simon left the stand, he made a very, very emotional speech that was addressed to the presiding judge. Simon stated, and I quote, "Members of the jury, I stand before you today not as a guilty man, but as a victim of a calculated and malicious frame-up. The charges against me are baseless, manufactured, and designed to deceive you. I categorically deny all accusations. This is not a case of illegal weapons purchases. It's a case of deliberate misrepresentation and the abuse of a broken system. The prosecution's star witness T5 has presented a carefully constructed narrative, but I urge you to look beyond the surface and examine the evidence critically. The financial transactions presented are not evidence of my guilt. They are, in fact, evidence of a complex web of deceit and manipulation. The prosecution's attempt to link these transactions to purchase of illegal weapons is a blatant distortion of the truth. My business dealings with T5 were entirely legitimate, and any suggestion otherwise is a gross misrepresentation. I have never knowingly purchased illegal weapons. I have never knowingly sent illegal weapons to individuals in the southeastern region of Nigeria, and I will never engage in such activities. This case is a testament to the fallibility of the justice system and the ease with which a person can be falsely accused. I urge you to consider the inherent weaknesses in the prosecution's case, the lack of concrete evidence, and the questionable motives of the key witness. I'm confident that a thorough examination of all the facts will lead you to one inescapable conclusion. I'm innocent, I'm a victim of conspiracy, and I trust in your judgment to see through this charade and deliver justice. I implore you to find me not guilty. Well, as you can see, this is a very, very emotional speech coming from Simon, addressed to the presiding judge. The presiding judge allowed him to present that speech in the courtroom today. And let's see what followed suit. And let's see other actions that played out after Simon rendered that emotional speech in court. After Simon was done with his speech, the judge continued by saying, "Okay, everyone, I've been listening to the evidence, and honestly, the main witness, T5, hasn't made a very strong case. The things they have said don't really connect very well, and it all feels a bit shaky. Is this really the best the prosecution can do? Because to be frank, it doesn't seem like they have much to back up their claims. If this is all you've got, then it looks like Mr. Simon might actually be innocent. I'm also a bit puzzled why they even brought this witness in. Their testimony hasn't really helped us understand what happened. I'm asking the prosecution why they brought this person in the first place." So as you can see, the judge did not buy up all of the statements and testimonies coming from testifier number 5. And the judge came out to clearly state that if this is what you have against Simon, it's very possible that Simon might be innocent. So let's see what the prosecuting lawyer had to say. Let's see his response to the judge, because the judge asked him a very clear question. If this is all you have to say or do against Mr. Simon, the defendant, let's see what this man, the prosecuting lawyer, have in his pocket. He said, "Your Honor, I appreciate your observations, but T5 testimony is supported by documented evidence reflecting a broader context of illegal activities, and their direct knowledge is crucial for establishing the timeline. We are prepared to present further evidence to reinforce their claims, and we are confident the jury will see the connections and implications." And the judge responded by saying, "I don't want to hear anything coming from this testifier known as T5. I think I've heard a lot from him. This guy don't have anything to present. His evidence doesn't add up. His words doesn't connect, and his claims are too baseless. And I can't sit here and listen to the nonsense coming from your testifier. Do you have somebody else you really want to present to the courtroom today? Do you have a better witness, a better testifier that has something to say, that has tangible things to say?" And the prosecutor lawyer said, "Yes, I have somebody else in my list of testifiers. Yes, I have somebody else, and this happens to be a vigilante officer from the southeastern region of Nigeria. This guy did not travel with T5. In fact, T5 and T6 traveled separately. So the testimonies coming from these two different witnesses are not rehearsed. The testimonies coming from T5 and T6 has no connection. That is to say, these guys haven't met each other before. They haven't had any conversations before. These are two different individuals from two different units in the southeastern region of Nigeria. So permit me to bring up my 6th testifier known as T6, who, like I said, is a vigilante officer from the southeastern region of Nigeria. Presiding judge said, "Hope your testifier T6 knows what he's about to say. Hope this guy has been briefed on their stance in court. I don't want you to ever bring someone like T5 to the court moving forward. If ever you bring a witness that has a very weak statement, I will suspend you and your witnesses for making statements in the courtroom. I don't want you guys to come here and make up words, make up scenarios in your head. We are trying to seek justice, and we want justice to preside and prevail." And the prosecutor lawyer said, "Yes, I understand, and that is why I have somebody, a vigilante officer, who has a lot of things to say. He has a lot of evidence, facts, and data to back up all of his claims. And please, With your permission, permit me to bring up my sixth testifier. And the presiding judge nodded and said, okay, you have the green light. Bring up your testifier number 6 and let's see what he has to say and claim. T6 was brought into the stand. He did all necessary rights needed to be done as the testifier, and he was ready for cross-examination by the prosecuting lawyer. After T6 did all necessary rights needed to be done as a testifier, the prosecuting lawyer asked T6, officer, could you please state your full name and current occupation for the record? Mr. T6 gave his full name and also claimed that I am a vigilante officer in a specific region in the southeastern region of Nigeria. The prosecutor asked, officer, can you describe the situation in your region during the time or the period in which Simon's social media posts were active? T6 replied by saying the region was experiencing significant unrest. There were protests, clashes, and a general atmosphere of fear and instability. Many lives were lost, and the community was deeply affected. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, and did you personally observe or experience any of this unrest? T6 replied by saying, yes, I did. I was on the ground daily, working to maintain order and protect my community. The prosecuting lawyer said, now, officer, you mentioned Mr. Simon's social media post. Can you describe what you observed regarding this post? T6 said, I observed that Mr. Simon's post was widely shared and discussed within the community. They were filled with inflammatory languages like calls to action and often targeted specific groups of individuals. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, can you give us some specific examples of the languages used in this post? T6 provided all of the languages and the tones Mr. Simon used during his social media posts and videos. And the prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, did you see any evidence of Mr. Simon's post directly leading to any specific act of violence or unrest? T6 said, yes, I did. On several occasions, we saw protests and clashes that appeared to be directly inspired by Mr. Simon's post. The timing and the content of this post correlated closely with the outbreaks of violence. The prosecuting lawyer continued by asking, officer, what was the overall impact of Mr. Simon's social media activity on the community? T6 replied, the impact was devastating. His post fueled the unrest, spread misinformation, and incited fear. They contributed to the breakdown of order and led to significant suffering within the community. The prosecuting lawyer continued by saying, thank you, officer. No further questions at this point. At this point, Simon's lawyer for the very first time stood up and said, my lord, please permit me to cross-examine T6, a vigilante officer. Please permit me, give me the permission to ask him some specific questions. And the presiding judge gave his permission. So Simon's lawyer walked up to the stand and asked, T6, officer, good morning. You've stated you are a vigilante officer from a specific region in the southeastern region of Nigeria. Can you please describe the structure and official standing of your organization within the local government area and local governance? T6 answered, I am a member of a local security group that works with a community to maintain peace and safety. We are not officially sanctioned by the government in their formal sense, but we collaborate with local authorities and community leaders to address security concerns. Our primary focus is on preventing and responding to threats, ensuring the well-being of our community. The defense lawyer asked, so, to be clear, you are not a sworn law enforcement officer, nor do you have the legal authority to arrest or detain individuals. T6 replied by saying, that is correct. Our role is primarily focused on community safety and security. We work to identify and address potential threats and assist in maintaining order, but we do not have the same powers as official law enforcement agencies. Simon's lawyer asked, now, officer, you've testified regarding Mr. Simon's social media post and their alleged impact. Did you personally witness Mr. Simon's creating this post, or are you basing your observations on their widespread dissemination? T6 replied by saying, I did not personally witness Mr. Simon creating this post. However, I observed their wide dissemination and the resulting impact on the community. The posts were shared extensively and their content was discussed openly in various local channels, including social media groups, local markets, and community gatherings. The origin of the post was generally known and attributed to Simon, your client. The defense lawyer stated, "You mentioned that Mr. Simon's post incited violence. Can you provide specific examples where Mr. Simon directly instructed individuals to commit acts of violence, or where you explicitly called for specific violent actions?" Tixis answered, "While I cannot provide instances where Simon or Mr. Simon explicitly instructed individuals to commit violence, his post contained inflammatory languages, calls to action that could be interpreted as inciting violence, and targeted specific groups and individuals with derogatory and provocative messages. For instance, he often used the language that demonized certain ethnic groups, called for protest against specific government policies, and shared misinformation that fueled animosity and unrest. This post created an environment conducive to violence and unrest, even if they did not directly command specific violent acts." Simon's lawyer continued by saying, "Officer, did you conduct any formal analysis of social media algorithms or trends to determine the reach and impact of Mr. Simon's post? Did you investigate how widely these posts were shared, who was sharing them, and who was reacting to them?" T6 continued by saying, "No, I did not conduct a formal analysis of social media algorithms. My assessment of the impact was based on my observations within the community. I was on ground witnessing the reactions to this post, the discussions they generated, and the resulting increase in tension and unrest. The posts were widely shared and discussed, and their content was a prominent topic of conversation." Simon's lawyer continued by asking, "You stated that protests and clashes appeared to be directly inspired by Mr. Simon's post. Could it be that other factors such as an economic hardship, political grievances, and pre-existing tensions contributed to the unrest, and that Mr. Simon's posts were merely one element among many others?" T6 replied by saying, "I acknowledge that other factors contributed to the unrest. Economic hardship, political grievances, and pre-existing tensions undoubtedly played a role. However, the timing and the content of Mr. Simon's post often coincided with outbreaks of violence and escalation of tensions. His post amplified existing grievances, fueled misinformation, and incited further unrest. Why not the sole cause? They significantly exacerbated the situation and contributed to the escalation of violence." And Simon's lawyer and this guy, known as T6, went on and on to have a series of conversations and series of debates, questions and answers and whatsoever. But one thing we observed is that this man known as T6 cannot be a vigilante officer, because the kind of English he used in the courtroom, the kind of sentences he created, and his choice of languages and words cannot come from a local vigilante officer. This simply means that this man is not saying the truth, or the prosecuting lawyer is not telling the court the actual fact. We don't believe that a vigilante officer, a local vigilante officer that resides in the village, can speak this well in a courtroom, can defend himself, can defend his legal counsel team, and defend the case.
All right, lovers of freedom, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. You're welcome to this YouTube channel. You know, this is the only channel where you get your legit information, raw data regarding what is actually happening in Finland. That is the court case between the Finnish government and the zoo government of Nigeria. You can see how Simon Ekpa have gradually defeated the Nigerian state in the Finnish court. That is the reason why the Nigerian state have been fighting so much to make sure that this man get extradited to Nigeria, but they have failed because Finland have vowed to protect this man, because the only thing this man have done wrong is to expose their criminal activities in Southeast, in Biafra land. That is the only thing he has done wrong. You are tagging him a terrorist. Okay, since over 5 months this man has been on detention, what is actually happening in Biafra land? Have the massacre stopped? Have the neutralization of innocent Biafrans stopped? Have the different thousands of checkpoints in Southeast that are extorting Biafrans, have they stopped? No. These are questions Finland needs to answer. And these are questions we, the Biafrans, we keep asking Finland. Why are you believing or why are you accepting this same petition? A petition sent by Bianca Ojukwu in collaboration with these Biafran governors, with the help of Attorney General of like the zoo country called Nigeria. They were able to send this petition to Finland, and that is why this innocent man has been in detention for over 5 to 6 months now for doing nothing. The only thing Simon Ekpa have done wrong is to expose these people criminal activities in Biafra land. And Biafra is not a new thing to the ears of the Finnish government, because all the convention, all the program, all the protests that we the Biafrans have been doing in Finland was signed by the Finnish government. So they were aware that this particular man is the Prime Minister of Biafrans in diaspora. That is it. They were aware of this particular position. So I believe that why they took in Simon Ekpa is for them to do the proper thing. That is the proper investigation, because the act of terrorism is not a simple accusation. For you to accuse somebody to be a terrorist is not a easy accusation. It comes with facts. It comes with a lot of documentation. It comes with a lot of investigation. But this man have not shied away from the social media for a very, very long time. If he said he has been contesting in Finland, he is a very, very popular man in Finland. Understand? So the Nigerian government need to realize this, that they have failed in this case, that they have also failed in the case of our leader Mazin Nnamdi Kanu, because they have no other way to go again. Because Mazin Nnamdi Kanu have gradually defeated them in court and will keep defeating them. So my good people of Biafra, if you are just joining us now, do well to subscribe to this YouTube channel. You can check back our previous videos so that you can understand how we the Biafrans will continue to fight and make sure that we defeat these so-called zoo police and zoo army in our land. That is the fact. We need to make sure that we defeat them. So check back our previous videos so that you can know what is going on, how we have been following up with the trial of Mazin Nnamdi Kanu in the Federal High Court of the Zoological Republic called Nigeria, and also the current case now going on with Simon Ekpa, that is the Finnish court, and the Nigerian country called Nigeria. So this is where you get your legit information. Don't go about believing the propaganda zoo media that all they want and all they believe in is to spread false information regarding the restoration and liberation of our people from the zoo country called Nigeria. That is it. That is all they want. Remember, by this time last year, they were telling us that Simon Ekpa had been taken to the world's toughest prison. Early this year, they told us that this month that he will be brought to Nigeria and his trial will commence in Nigeria. These are fake news. They are telling us again last week that Simon Ekpa said he's a content creator. He this one. These are fake news. They have never said or broadcasted anything that will lead in support of our freedom and liberation. So don't go about believing the zoo media. Make sure you subscribe to these channels. Make sure you subscribe to all these local channels in YouTube that are keen in progressing and broadcasting and showing off our liberation, our freedom from the zoo country called Nigeria. Because you can see how gradually the Tinubu government is sinking. We, the Biafrans, it will be a shame to us that we sink with this so-called Tinubu government. He still has 6 years to go, and that 6 years will be will be fire into the Biafran people. That is why we need to start speaking.